All right, everybody. Good afternoon and welcome to Considering a Lateral Move to Law Related, put on through the Charles Widger School of Law's Villanova Law Alumni Association Board and the Novus Young Alumni Board. My name is Kim Madden and I'm the Associate Director for Alumni Relations for the Law School. We're really excited to have you here today for this program. This is the final program in a full four-part series. All programs will be posted on the Villanova Law Alumni website in the new year for reference. Each panel focused on a different type of lateral move, and today we're talking about moving to law-related careers. This is an anonymous program today, so if you have questions for the panelists, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to submit your question, and I will direct it to the moderator. And now I'm going to turn it over to your moderator today. I'm excited to welcome Ashanti Crawford. She is a Villanova Law Alumni Association board member and a president of the Minority Alumni Society. She is manager of legal talent acquisition at Troutman Pepper. And I'm going to hand it over to her to introduce our panelists and get us started. Thanks, Ashanti.
Thank you very much, Kim. We are excited to finish strong with this last panel. I have some very esteemed panelists. We have Evan Armstrong, who is a graduate of the law school in 2011, who is the VP of Government Affairs and at Retail Industry Leaders Association. I also have Alexis Madden, another graduate of 2011, who is the Director of Marketing and Business Development at Conrad O'Brien. And last but not least, Christine Mooney, class of 1995, who is the Director of Professional Skills and Professor at Law at Villanova Law School. So in today's session, we are going to, we've all heard you can do anything with a law degree. And this panel is full of people who are doing those other things that we've been promised that you can do with your JD. And so while we recognize that many law students choose to practice, there are a lot of people who find themselves gravitating to careers outside of legal practice. And in this less traditional route, oftentimes it can be more challenging, or you have to leverage your resources, your network a little bit differently, and give a specialized attention. But our esteemed panelists today can give you some insight into their journey, how they made their moves, and answer any questions that you might have. As we said, this is anonymous, but we will be taking questions as they come in. So feel free to use the chat section and submit your questions. And I'll get started by letting our panelists give us their background story of what was your path to your current position and what were you looking for in your move. So Evan, I'll start with you.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me here today. Happy to always talk to Villanova alum and students about different opportunities they can do after they leave Villanova. My path was directly from law school to Washington D.C. I had a keen interest in public policy and politics. Since basically my 2L year, I got very involved with certain local races and some national organizations. And so following my 2L year, I really looked for opportunities in Washington, D.C., where I could get involved. And the way you do that in Washington, D.C. is become an intern. And I know that's a joke, but I was an intern between my 2L and 3L years on Capitol Hill in the House of Representatives for a Congressman Bob Latta from Ohio. In that role, I was able to develop, the experience that I needed to understand at least a little how the world worked down there. So I really enjoyed it. It's tough being an intern, and I didn't get that much coffee, but I did get some. I had to secure softball fields on the National Mall for the Ohio softball team. That was fun, but I also got to write dozens and dozens of constituent response letters on a number of different public policy topics. So I was able to use my writing skills from law school and use my sort of critical thinking skills that I developed at Villanova Law to respond to constituent concerns sort of across the spectrum. So I used that experience and really wanted to return to that world after graduation. And so I was able to, while studying for the bar that summer after my 3L year, travel down to DC and interview for jobs. And I was able to secure a legislative assistant role in the House of Representatives for Congressman Mike Kaufman of Colorado. So I think having the JD helped me get a leg up on getting that role. Typically in Washington, and especially on Capitol Hill, folks start as interns and then move sort of up the chain to staff assistant, legislative correspondent, and then to a legislative staffer. I think the law degree helped me jump the line a little bit there. So from there, I worked on the Hill for another 5 years for a few different members of Congress, and then moved over to begin my career at the Retail Industry Leaders Association as their Vice President of Government Affairs. So I've now been in DC, shockingly, about 10 years, and really enjoyed it. And again, a testament to my experience in education at Villanova prepared me to use those skills in Washington, DC. Even though I'm not a practicing attorney, I do work with the law quite a bit. So, but that's a little bit of the short story of me from law school to where I am now.
Great. Thank you so much. Alexis, I'm going to turn the same question to you.
All right. Well, thank you also for having me. I'm excited to talk to everyone today. And I was all in on law school and practicing. I was a paralegal before I went to law school for a couple of years in New York at a big corporate law firm. I liked it. All the attorneys said, don't go to law school. I didn't listen. I went. I then I did real estate there. I wasn't as excited about the corporate side of things, and I really wanted to do litigation. I loved all my practical courses at Villanova, trial advocacy and that sort of thing. And I was all in on litigation and trial work and that sort of path. So I practiced at 2 different firms for about 4 years in total. And while I still miss, I'd say, some of the things that I did as a trial attorney and in litigation, it just wasn't the life that I wanted for myself. I think there was a couple too many Fridays for me when attorneys would come in after a busy week or not a busy week and say, oh, we're going to need, partner come in. Oh, we're going to need you to stay late and work on this TRO or something similar. And it happened just a couple too many times. I worked with great people. I had great mentors, but I just didn't like that non-flexible life, or I didn't have the work-life balance that I really wanted. And so at my firm, Conrad O'Brien, I was practicing as an associate. I started being interested more in marketing. At the same time, I was trying to explore other options, kind of see what I wanted to do. I talked to a ton of people. I did kind of informal interviews, kind of called anyone who would talk to me, tell me about your life, tell me about your job. What do you like? What don't you like? I wasn't necessarily looking for a job. I just kind of talked to anyone who wanted to talk to me. Around the same time, the current marketing manager was taking on a new role at a new firm. And I basically went to the partner in charge of marketing and our director of administration and said, can I have this job? Can I apply for this job? And they said, you don't want to practice here anymore? And I said, not really, but I love the firm and I'd love to stay involved. And so after kind of that interview process here, they took me on, and I've risen, and now I'm the director of marketing and business development here. And I've been doing it for quite a few years, more than practice at this point, I think. And that's kind of the short story of my path to marketing.
Thank you so much, Alexis. And Christine, how about your path?
So thank you as well for having me. I have both an alum as well as on the faculty at Villanova Law. So it is very near and dear to my heart, as are all of the students and the alums. So my path, I think, was a little bit different in that I started out at law school as a non-traditional student. I had been working for several years when I decided to go to law school. I was married at that point. I had two very small children at that point, and decided, sort of against all odds and with the encouragement of my husband, who said, why not, in the face of all that, to just go. So I attended school and I really loved it. And what I loved the most was the researching and the writing aspect of law school. So I thoroughly enjoyed my 3 years. And after graduation, I went into practice at a boutique firm, an environmental firm, Manco Golden Catcher. And I really loved it there. I learned so much. The standards there, as they are at lots of sort of high level firms, were really, really high. And I felt as though it was a terrific expansion of my education. And I learned a ton. And the people who I worked with were also wonderful. But kind of the way Alexis mentioned, the demands of practice had become pretty onerous at that level, practicing litigation. I had a third child at that point, and the firm could not have been more accommodating with parental leave and so forth, and allowing me to construct a part-time position. But as anyone who litigates knows, it's pretty tough to be a part-time litigator because the courts and opposing counsel and clients don't operate on a 3 or 4 day a week schedule. So after doing that for some time, it as much as I loved it and as much as I felt as though there were a lot of things about practicing that I really enjoyed, and as accommodating as the firm was, it just became too difficult for me to balance having 3 children and that kind of lifestyle. So at that point, I resigned from the firm and had decided that I was going to take 6 months and do nothing except figure out what I wanted to do. And so it was this intentional hiatus. And I got about 2 months into that when I received a phone call that somebody was going out on parental leave at Villanova in the legal writing, on the legal writing faculty, and would I step in? So it was just a completely unexpected opportunity. It kind of went against my plan of taking the 6 months to sort of contemplate and decide what I would want to do. But at the same time, although I hadn't considered up until then teaching in law school, I always knew that if I was going to do anything, where my heart was writing. So I accepted that, thinking, okay, I'll just postpone that 6 month period and I'll do this for the semester. And by the time I had finished, there was a permanent opening had opened up, and I have been there ever since. So I have been on the faculty for 21 years. Although I can't believe it's been that long, although it has been a long time, I have had the opportunity to have a lot of different roles. I started out as a legal writing professor. I then went on and became the director of legal writing. At that point, I went upstairs and was the academic dean for 3 years, did a stint of that. And now I'm in my current role, which is on the full-time faculty as a professor of law, but also in a newly defined role, director of professional skills, where I oversee really all of our curriculum, which has expanded quite a bit, certainly since I was there, but I think even since my co-panelists were there, to include a whole range of practical skill type courses. So that's where I am now. And although these roles have been somewhat different, of course, they are all within academia, and it's just been fantastic.
Thank you, Christine. That actually is a perfect segue to what my next question is going to be. Alexis, I know you mentioned that you did, when you were trying to figure out what else to do, you kind of took on a lot of informational interviews to find out what are people doing, what does that job entail. Christine, you gave us a good preview what it is that you do. So I'm going to ask Alexis and Evan if you can just expound for the benefit of others, because a lot of times you just, as I'm hearing is kind of a theme, you didn't really know that these opportunities were available. It's just something you didn't think about, right? So this is another opportunity for our viewers to just get insight on what other careers look like. So Alexis, if you could just expound a little bit more on what it means in your role, and then I'll kick the same question to you, Evan.
Yes, so I really liked the more creative side of things. I really liked the people-to-people interactions, and I wasn't really getting that sitting at a desk writing briefs. So kind of unlike what Christine was saying, I liked the less writing piece and more of those interactions. So I was looking for something that was a bit more different day to day and had a little bit more of working across the firm. So in my role, I do all of the business development and marketing for the firm, which means anything, and my every day is different, means anything from rebuilding websites. I'm just finishing one right now, maintaining the website, social media, research, competitive intelligence research. So I do use my research background on companies that we might be pitching to or contacts. Working with attorneys to help figure out what their plan's going to be to get business, to grow their contacts. So some sort of like more coaching on that end, working with new attorneys to develop their path towards business development. So I really work with all different levels of practice. I do use some of my legal research skills when I'm looking up cases and various cases really and types of litigation that clients have been involved in or potential clients have been involved in. And I do still write. I do a lot of the copy for the website and press releases and that sort of thing. So it's really anything to grow our business and to maintain our business. That's kind of what my job encompasses.
Evan?
Yeah, I think Alexis and I have a lot in common where we like to have a little diversity in our days and our weeks and our months. And the days on the Hill are very dynamic, I would say. There's always a crisis or a fire or something happening on the Hill where you have to use a whole host of skills. I also enjoy the fact that it's a people business. It's speaking to, when you're a counsel for a member of Congress, it's speaking to constituents, it's speaking to stakeholders in the business community or trade associations, and trying to figure out, the path forward on a certain policy, a bill. And so I really like that aspect of the world in DC. And then in my role now, I'm not official side. I'm not working for a member of Congress. I'm now on the stakeholder lobbying side. And, I represent, the retail industry, which is a very broad, diverse group of retail brands with a whole host of issues. And so I enjoy, again, being able to utilize, those skills of marketing and skills of networking and communication to sort of be the conduit from our industry to the Hill, and again to make sure that the right policies are being crafted, the right messages are being said that best reflect where our members want to be. There's a whole host of things I could to speak about, but I think the skills from Villanova, reading, writing, critical thinking, the opportunities that I had to network as a Villanova Law student were crucial to developing the skills of networking, which is basically my job right now. I think I've taken those, consistently over the last 10 years in every role. So I think that's sort of a little bit of a story, but it's hard to nail down exactly, what a lobbyist does, which is, a good and bad thing for the profession.
You guys have been perfect for ending where my next question is about to begin. I wanted to talk about the role of your network in, landing you the position that you're in, or helping you to find out more about other options. Christine, you mentioned that someone reached out to you. Alexis, you talked about how you did several informational interviews, and so you knew positions came up. Evan, and you just ended with that. So I open this up to whomever wants to jump in first, but how valuable do you find networking, and do you have any tips for what someone who's interested in making a lateral move should do to leverage their network to help them in that journey?
I can start. What I speak to a lot of students from Villanova, and other schools, specifically the ones who want to get involved in Washington, D.C. I'm a member of the alumni public policy group down in DC. So I speak to a number of students and some alumni. And basically the message I say is, networking is work. You should focus on the work part of that because that's what you have to do, really. You never know where opportunities are going to arise. And so what I say is, go to events, be personable, do check-ins, when you meet somebody who may not be directly where you want to go, but follow up with them, give them updates, because networking isn't about who you know, it's about the people that they know. And that's what's going to get you to whatever opportunity may come next. So for me personally, when I was a student, I got involved with some local campaigns in the Pennsylvania area. And so that created a little bit of a network and a Rolodex. But I was also able to become involved with the Federalist Society, which I ran as the president my 3L year. But through that network, I created a tremendous amount of emails that I could touch base with. And some of those led me to some of my first positions in DC. So I just say, be proactive, take opportunities, follow up, and make sure that you are putting the work in, because that's what is required to network.
I would
Excellent.
also say, I found those informational interviews that I spoke about really important and helpful in finding my next move. And one thing that was helpful, if possible, is kind of coming from a position of strength in a way, in that I had a job. I was, plugging away at the firm. I wasn't desperately looking for something else. So these informational interviews were really open-ended conversations and not like, where can I find a job? What can I do? I mean, I was very motivated to make a move, but it wasn't that I needed one. And obviously that's not a option if you need a job and don't have one, and you need to be networking and hustling to find something. But if you're looking to make a move, I think it's great if you can, network and talk to people, but in that open-ended way, and just ask them questions. What do they like? What don't they like? And that leads to a more productive conversation, versus sometimes if someone's looking for a job and it's clear, it's kind of a harder conversation to get going. And don't be afraid in terms of reaching out to people. People are always happy to talk about themselves, really, and give you some information about what they like to do and what they don't. So, I mean, I really emailed so many people who were friends of friends of friends, or contacts of contacts of contacts, and not people that I knew directly. So I think that's what Evan was saying. It's not just who you know, it's all those other connections from that first connection.
Yeah, I would just add, I think all of that's very true. I 100% am where I am because of network, as I explained sort of my path. I think that always remembering that there's no interaction that's too small to count, and sort of following up on those things. If somebody offers to talk to you, follow up and do it. I also think that there's something to be said for putting yourself in the place where the people who have the job that you want to have are. So whether that means joining different committees, or volunteering, or attending, practice meetings, or whatever the particular organization is, I think that, using your existing network, but also developing a new network that is where you're really trying to insert yourself into the area where the people who are doing what you think you might like to do, where they are.
I think that's also a great point. I mean, in my role, I built up my attorney networks, and then I got into this legal marketing role, and now I'm on the board of the Legal Marketing Association. So I'm growing my network, or I've grown my networks there. So in terms of, there's always industry groups. That's what I tell my attorneys too. There's always industry groups to get involved in. So thinking about where you want to be, and there's always a group to get involved with or talk to from that.
Excellent. Thank you. I think one thing I'll add is that once you figure out what it is you want to do, oftentimes I've seen people who don't share, they kind of keep their interest and think that they have to plug at it alone. And the panelists are sharing that your network is important, and it's important to let people know what you want to do, right? So that when those opportunities come around, that they think about you and can refer things back. So don't feel like you have to keep everything. It can be a delicate balance, right? You don't want to risk your current employment by letting people know that you are interested in something outward, something else, but then you risk not being, losing those opportunities when they come around because people just don't know that you're interested. So I encourage you also to kind of share with your network things that you're interested in. It doesn't necessarily mean that you want to make a move, but share what your interests are so that may open doors for you in the future.
I think just to piggyback on that, I think having people know that you want to do something or you're interested is so key. And part of the way you do that is sort of consistent follow-ups. And when I say follow-ups, it's somebody you met, at a happy hour or an event, got an email, and you emailed and said, hey, it was great to meet you. I'd love to follow up with you in a couple months. And you just sort of create a cadence of being top of mind. And it's not just once or twice, you're talking 5, 10, 15 connections, which could just be a call or an email, but that consistency does keep you on the mind of folks who may see something and may be able to pass along some information or some opportunities to you. So I say that consistent follow-up where you don't ask for anything, you just check in and say, hey, I hope you're doing well. I just did this, yada, yada, yada. Those are meaningful. And to Christine's point, nothing is too small. Make sure you build those interactions up over time.
Great. Thank you. I have a viewer submitted question. It says, can we hear more about ideas to move from practicing to higher education / academia? 15 years out from law school and practicing the entire time. This person is 15 years out from law school and has been practicing the entire time, and they'd like to hear about how to transition into that type of position. So Christine, I think you're the obvious panelist for this question.
So I think there are a couple of things. I think that one thing is that when you're in academia and it is so valuable, those years of practice, they really are. I think it's so important that, at least some of the faculty have that kind of practical experience to come into the classroom with. So I think one way, though, is that you want to try to get some teaching experience. And sometimes that's by being a mentor to associates, by becoming involved in training in practice. So whether it is that you're doing some CLE programs or you're mentoring within your own law firm, or become an adjunct. Becoming an adjunct is not necessarily a path, particularly to becoming to working full-time in academia, but what it does do is it gives you some teaching experience. And, if you are able to demonstrate that you're able to connect with students in the classroom, you'll inevitably get course evaluations. If those are positive, that's just more that you can point to that is relevant to being in academia. And often, if you've been in practice, most people have a particular field of expertise. So let's say it's tax, go be a tax adjunct at one of the law schools and get that kind of experience. I think it's also, if you are looking for a tenured kind of position, coming with a record of publication, a scholarly agenda, Those are other things that any academic institution is going to be looking for. What is your area of scholarly interest? So getting a publication or two under your belt by the time you start looking is also going to be helpful.
Thank you so much. I want to add to that, to Christine's suggestion that you can consider becoming an adjunct professor. Candace Centeno at the law school, I believe, is in charge of that. And that's a contact that you could reach out to if you have interest. I believe that there are some positions that they are looking for adjunct professors for. So feel free to check into that.
There are, and there always are, because people get busy, people retire for one reason or another. You know, our adjuncts are not, some do, but most don't have the same longevity for obvious reasons that a full-time person does. So there often are those openings. We have several sections of some skills classes like trial advocacy, like civil pretrial. So there are, various opportunities. And in addition to people coming and going, we also have sometimes we have a bigger class than we anticipated, so we need to add sections of things. So I think that's one area that you probably if you are patient and have an area that you're willing to take on like that for a couple of them, you probably would find some success with that.
Great. What about, do you have any suggestions? This is another question from the audience about administration in higher ed, not teaching. They want to get into academia and then staff side.
So I was in administration for a while. I was the academic dean. Some positions are hired just from outside, others not. So it depends on what area of administration. If you're going to, I don't think we've ever had an academic dean that wasn't pulled from the faculty. But we have all sorts of other kinds of administrative positions, both in, say, for example, career strategy, alumni relations. We have like financial whole area that does that. We have marketing. So depending on what area of administration you want to get into, again, I would say the same thing. You probably want to show some experience in that level, whether it be with, PR or admissions is another one that's not drawn from the faculty. So just getting some sort of experience that would be relevant at least. And again, even if it's just in the job that you have now, something that would be relevant, whether it's recruiting, let's say you saw a position in career strategy. Have you been involved or can you get yourself involved with the recruiting aspect where you are now? So I guess sometimes it depends what area of administration.
And again, I think this has a lot to do with doing the informational interviews and getting connected to that. If you think that you want to move into that that profession, what organizations can you start volunteering in or serving that you can kind of be in the know of opportunities and get to meet a lot of the people in that area so that you can be, at Evan's word, top of mind. You'll hear about the opportunities and you might be top of mind if people know that you're interested when those opportunities come up. I want to talk about, throughout this, you all have talked about your transferable skills from either directly from law school or from your previous practice. And I have an audience question that says that they are in the district attorney's office and they want to focus on moving to nonprofit or government roles. But they are in criminal law and they're concerned that their skills might not translate. And this could be for anyone who feels like, maybe you're moving from criminal law, but you want to do something else. Can you give a broader overview of maybe expanding, their mind on what skills are transferable beyond just, you practicing criminal law? There are a lot of other things. And then what they have is a 3-part question. So the next part, I'll just give you the next part. And then what roadblocks or part of the transition to the new job did you not expect or know about until working there?
I can jump in since it was more government related, I guess, at least a little bit. I went straight from law school. So I wasn't coming from another profession, but in DC, there's a lot of folks who have professional experience who move into the public policy space, whether it's in the government or in nonprofits. So if you're thinking about going from criminal justice, that's a huge issue. And certainly it's a big issue on the nonprofit side. There's any number of organizations that are dedicated to criminal justice reform in a number of different aspects, whether it's from sentencing or police reform, or again, there's so many topics in that space. So having a background in criminal law would serve you well in that space. And in the government, obviously, there's agencies and departments that are, that's their job is criminal law at the federal level. So you could get involved from a policy level, from a subject matter expertise level in that space. On the Hill, and this goes into the Roadblocks, Capitol Hill is a very insular place. And unfortunately, it's hard to get in the door unless you've been in the door. And I know that's a sort of a puzzling way to say it. I had to intern. I interned as a law student, and then I was able to start at a certain level. But I wasn't making any money at a law school, so I had no concept of how little I was making in my first job, except for I knew I didn't have very much. But the difficulty, I think, for folks going to Capitol Hill from another profession is that it's very likely going to be a pay cut, because you have to start at a lower level and work up, because that's just the way it works on Capitol Hill. Unless you're coming in at a very high level as a very high level subject matter expert working on committee projects, it's difficult to get sort of that, glide path to a salary that you may be making now. So I think that's a bit of a sticker shock for folks who want to move into Capitol Hill, is that they don't pay well, and you're probably going to start at a lower level than maybe your credentials would lead you to believe. So just keeping that in mind, but there are a number of opportunities in government and public policy outside Capitol Hill that would certainly utilize a criminal law background.
Alexis, I think you were going to.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think also thinking about your skills broadly rather than the subject matter is valuable. Like I wouldn't think of legal writing, thinking of writing or networking, just or legal research, and how those can be advertised or portrayed or launched into other relevant skills to where you want to be is important. For me, like the critical thinking of how to accomplish a project has been really important. And I wouldn't necessarily, that's not top of mind as something that you get from going to law school. But then if you take a step back and look at it from a higher level, I think that it, those skills that you don't think of day to day really are something that's ingrained in how you operate as a lawyer. And those can be really helpful and something that another industry might be looking for. So maybe taking the criminal piece out of it and looking at your skill set more broadly can be helpful. In terms of Roadblocks, I agree. I think it's important to realize you might not be at the same level financially or with your title that you were at your, or are at your current job. So being able or willing to take a little bit of a step back when you go into the next position is kind of a reality check. And, sometimes some things are doable and some things aren't. And putting in, that time of nothing's too small when you start in your new job, and building yourself back up that way.
Yeah, I hate to be repetitive, but I will just round that out by saying academia, same challenge. You're never going to make what you would have made had you stayed in practice. And I think for, especially when I was academic dean, I was involved in a lot of the hiring, and particularly, the person that asked about administration, there is some, I think, sticker shock when people who have come from, years and years of practice and they have all of this experience, you're not going to make ever it's not like you're going to catch up and build yourself up, maybe the way that in an industry you can. You're never going to catch up in academia to what you would have made had you stayed in private practice, or at least the potential. Having said that, so I think it's just important that you think through kind of what your balance sheet looks like. And you certainly, you know, in my view, and I think most people that make this decision, the benefits far outweigh that. Someone once described it as psychic income. That is just, you really can't put a price on it. And again, not everybody's in that position to make that trade-off, but just the luxury of being able to think about and write about what I'm interested in and teach about it and design the creativity that you have in designing courses has been a real joy. As I said, I loved practice, but obviously in practice, your attention goes to whatever it is that the client needs it to go to. So the creative, the ability to be creative and think about things, and the luxury of time to think about things without having to make sure that you can bill for that thinking has been a real source of luxury and freedom, but it does not come at the same with the same financial incentives.
I think that's perfect. I think for most people, Evan, I think you were fortunate that you really evaluated this when you were in law school. But I think, you know, a lot of people, whether you realize that, you know, the practices of law in the traditional sense isn't what you thought it would be, or your life circumstances have changed and now your motivation is different. It kind of takes a step back of really evaluating what motivates you, what are your current needs, what's the life you want to live, and then taking the time to figure out what the options are out there that kind of will meet with what you want to do, and then figuring out what do you bring to the table, right? That's what we're talking about. And what are your translatable skills? What do you have to offer a position and lining up? And it could be a lot. I like what you said about the psychic benefit. And I know for me, at least with transitioning and a lot of attorneys, it can be hard. Like, discounting the prestige, right? Sometimes of being a lawyer. Are you ready to let go of that title? That's surprisingly can be a roadblock in itself. Is that the perception? Are you ready to do what you fulfill, or kind of get caught up in the prestige of it? So there are a lot of factors, but I think it takes a lot of figuring out what's truly important to you and doing the work within yourself, and then your network, as Evan put it. I'm totally going to be using that phrase from now on. You've changed my the way I viewed it. So how about law school grades? What are your thoughts on how law school grades affect or have an impact on where you are in your current position, or what led up to you being able to be where you are now?
0. Which was good for me. Unlike Alexis, I probably didn't spend as much time in the library as I should have. But for me in Capitol Hill, it was all about, you know, passion, purpose, and being able to sort of navigate that world, which is very unique. I think the writing skills and being able to read lots of information and synthesize it is valuable on Capitol Hill. And so that's the skills that I developed. Not at the dean's list level, but, you know, pretty good. And again, I think coming out of law school, you know, I think Capitol Hill valued my law degree rather than my GPA.
How about for you, Christine and Alexis? What is your experience, either personally or with others that you've known? What would you say?
So I would say that academia is different, that it is pretty focused on credentials and GPA and academic experience. I will say that outside of academia, I know countless people who have risen to the very top tiers of what they do who have not had high GPAs. So I would never tell anybody, and I counsel my students, if you have a target of where you want to be, I would never assume you can't get there. You may have to get there differently. You may not land the big firm job, for example, which isn't what most people, I think, on this call are looking to do. But you're not going to necessarily land that job right out of law school, but that doesn't mean you won't get there eventually. You just have to sort of hopscotch your way there in a different way. And I would say the same thing is that if what you really, really want to do is teach, get that experience, build that network, and, get that adjunct experience if you can. And that's going to smooth the way some, but it is, this is one area I would say, I don't know, there may be others, but it's really the one area in that I know of where, yes, it does matter. In fact, they're kind of hyper focused on it.
I'm kind of middle of the road. My grades helped get me the law firm jobs I had and to Conrad O'Brien, where I practiced before I took on the marketing role. But now that I'm in my current job, I'm more with Evan, zero impact. So kind of it got me to a certain point. But then after that, I honestly don't remember what my GPA was, probably for the best.
So I want to circle back to, the informational interviewing, just because, there are endless possibilities of what to do outside of the law, outside of practicing law. And so I want to empower our viewers to be able to ask the questions that will help them, get a better scope of what other opportunities look like. Alexis, you definitely started us off with some questions that could be asked. I believe you said, what does your day-to-day look like? Is it appropriate to ask, what does compensation look like? What do you like most about your job? What other questions do you think people should be asking when they're meeting with people? So Alexis, I'll start with you because I think you kicked us off with this at the very beginning of the panel and then open it up to our other panelists.
Yeah, I guess I asked, worst part, best parts. I wanted to know what the downsides were, what they didn't like, and evaluate for myself whether that's something I would or would not like. What the path was, I think you mentioned that, Ashanti. What kind of the organizational structure is. So I kind of understood where I would be coming in. Would I be starting as an intern or a coordinator, or could I come in as a manager level? I was a couple years into practice, but it would be possibly a new industry altogether. So I was looking at everything from like event planning, wedding planning, and then general counsel at universities and colleges. So plaintiff's law, I was talking to anybody. I really wanted to do a broad reach. So what the hours were, that was important to me. That was one of my main driving forces. I was getting ready to start a family, and I wanted to be there for school pickups. And so that was important to me. I didn't ask about compensation. I didn't ask about parental leave. I think that's a personal preference and your comfort level with the person. Maybe a closer contact, you could get into that. And I know now parental leave is probably more talked about than when I was doing this. So that might be a more open question than when I was broaching these conversations, if that's something that's important to you and top of mind.
Evan,
I think that's all true. I would just add, not only what was your path, but what are you looking for now? Because somebody may have gotten where they are in kind of like I did in a serendipitous way. I wouldn't advise people to quit their job and decide to stay home and hope that something out of the blue popped up and they were offered a temporary position that turned permanent. That was a, very strange serendipitous way to get where I am. So I would say asking people, what is it that you're looking for? What are the kinds of experience that you're looking for? What are your best recommendations on? Are there committees that I can join or volunteer work that I can do or organizations I can become part of that will give me the kind of experience that you would find most valuable if you were looking to hire somebody?
I think also sorry, I'll let Evan go, but team members, what are your team members look like if it is a part of a team or organization? Because the person you're talking to is obviously just one person. They work with different people day to day.
When I was a student, I had the opportunity to talk and get networks to different folks. I knew I wanted to be in DC. I didn't know exactly in what capacity. So I did and was able to speak to people who worked on Capitol Hill for federal agencies, for think tanks and nonprofits. And they all have sort of their pros and cons. I think I was in a good position because I was young and I could, I was making my first move. So, my mission was just to get to DC in the best way possible and then kind of experience what it is. And I think I was fortunate to land on Capitol Hill first because really that is the hub of everything else. Everything else sort of spokes off that, right? So, having that experience. But I just talked to a lot of different people in a lot of different capacities in the world that I wanted to be in, and then sort of took a leap and really figured it out from there. So I know for folks who are in existing positions might be a scary notion to sort of like take a leap into an unknown, but it's hard to sort of define an exact landing spot in a new industry or a new sort of space. And so I would just, do as many informational interviews, ask the questions that Christine and Alexis said, but it may just take a little bit of a leap and for you to get sort of in the world, and then that allows you to refine perhaps what exactly your interest is.
I think another resource, I don't know if the law school still does it, but some things to help as you're asking, other people what they do. And we talked about kind of finding out what motivates you. I think a lot of the, personality assessment tests and things like that can help you kind of refine what's important to you and what your skills are and see if they resonate with you. That might help you kind of figure out what industry you think might better suit your personal interests as well. So I'd also encourage people to consider if you feel like, you've hit a wall and you're just like, I just don't want to do this anymore and I don't even know what next. Sometimes kind of taking a step back and really finding out what motivates you can be another good step to help you see what industries or professions you should consider. But I think the panelists have been phenomenal in their suggestions. We are headed we're within the last 10 minutes. We have about 8 more minutes of our presentation. I just want to remind people that you can still submit questions. And we have included the contact link. I just want to make sure I get that out here. The LinkedIn profiles for all of our panelists, and they have graciously offered to be a resource to you if you have any further questions or you'd like to conduct informational interviews with them more directly. But I want to invite our panelists to kind of wrap us up with their parting words or key takeaways. If you have your kind of final thoughts. And Christine, I will start with you on your kind of parting words.
Sure. I guess what I would say is that obviously people have to make decisions that are financially, they have to be financially responsible for themselves and what it is that, is realistic for them. So everybody has to make their own decisions about that. But I guess I would just encourage you, based upon my experience, is don't ever think that something is, it's too late to make a change. As I said, when I went to law school, I was not right out of college. And I had several years of business experience at the time. And even though it seemed kind of preposterous with 2 small children to then decide that was the right time to go to law school, I wanted to. And, I had the support of my family, and I did. And then I practiced for 3 years and I kind of felt as though I wanted to do something else. But again, there was that voice telling me, well, gee, as it is, you already started later than other people. You invested all this money in your education. Not only that, you cost the family money by having to pay for daycare so you could go to law school. You can't, right? But you can. And I'm so glad I did. And I think that while it's not always an easy thing to do, you owe it to yourself to not stay invested in doing something that you really know, you would be happier doing something else. So I would just say that I've never regretted any of the decisions that I've made that maybe at first blush appeared to be something that didn't make a lot of sense. But what made sense was that I wanted to do something else. And I followed that, and I found it to be a really rewarding thing to have done.
I love that. And I 100% co-sign that. Alexis, how about you?
Yeah, I similar in a way. I would say if something doesn't feel right, don't be afraid or intimidated to make the change. I really did love a lot about practice, but I was also really unhappy. And I think, you come out of law school, a lot of your friends might be doing the typical law firm life, or other paths, but practicing. And I think you've invested time, you've invested a lot of energy studying and outlining and things I've blocked out from my memory. And of course, a lot of money on your education. And I think it's really takes a lot to say, you know what, practice isn't for me, and what else can I do with it? But that being said, I do not regret going to law school. I think the skills that I got from law school, from going through that process, from learning, has really translated well into my current career. For me, being a lawyer and interacting with lawyers, I actually do still really like interacting with all my lawyers at the firm. And I think being a lawyer really gives me the respect, in addition to skill set. So it's been a nice transition for me, to use law and also the more creative side of things. But if something doesn't feel right, there's a life outside of practice, and you're still using your law career, and it's okay. It's okay to move past it and find more professional happiness, and other things besides professional happiness. For me, I have a lot more flexibility now, which I really love. But doing that is, making the change. You're going to have to hustle and a little bit, and don't be afraid of that either. You're going to have to hustle up your new contacts, your new skill set, and so, you're going to have to put in the work a little bit.
Thank you. Evan.
But I can't really say it better than has already been said. So I will triple co-sign the comments. But, I think the thing to remember is, everybody's financial situation is different. Law school loans are no joke. I was able to fortunately pay mine off earlier this year, and it was a huge moment. But if you're looking for public, working in the public policy space or government, there are a number of different avenues to help with student loans. So don't necessarily allow that fear of the loans to stop you from doing something meaningful and purposeful that you want to do. So I just want to make sure that is known, because I remember when I got to the Hill and I realized how little I made, but there was a program for staffers on the Hill to pay portions of student loans each month, which, kept me afloat for 5 years. So I just wanted to reiterate that. And again, I think there's no price. You can't put a value on sort of mental peace of mind and happiness and doing what you want to do and having balance with your life. So I just encourage that and look at the opportunities to figure out the finances in any way you can.
Thank you. I got chastised a little bit in the comments that I didn't share my story. And that's because I usually talk way too much about myself. So I loved actually being able to hear about you guys. But I wanted to say that everything that's been said, I completely co-sign. And I also, just to give you a quick pitch, I practiced for about 3.5 years, realized that even though I found I liked being good at it, it did not personally fulfill me. So I did the same thing as everybody else, reevaluated kind of what is it that's truly important to you. And I was fortunate to realize that I wanted to give back in the capacity that I'm working. I knew I either wanted to work in a recruiting or at a law school career office, because I already had that experience. But I will say, just for my parting words, about something that might surprise you. Like for me, I work probably just as much as I did as a practicing attorney, or quite a bit more right now, but it's totally different when you find personal fulfillment in what you do. It's a different experience, when you work hard, but you actually feel like this is in alignment with who I am, what I want to do. It can just be totally rewarding. So don't feel like Christine said, that you have to stay in somewhere that you don't find fulfilling just because you've invested so much. Be true to yourself. So I want to encourage that. So we're a little bit over time. I just want to thank everyone again. Thank my panelists for taking the time out to give your amazing words of wisdom. I want to thank the Villanova Law Alumni Board and our president, John Iannozzi, for envisioning this webinar series, for my fellow committee members for helping to organize and execute the series, to Kim Madden, our associate director of alumni relations, for doing all the details and keeping this running. I want to and thank all of you for participating and watching today. I want to remind you guys that these will be available on the Law Alumni page. I don't believe it's up now, but if you keep an eye out for it, we will add all of the previous series and today's series online as well. And I hope that everybody can enjoy the rest of the end of the year and the holiday season. And here's to hoping that 2022 goes much better than this year. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining us today. Have a great holiday season.